History is full of criminals, but only a handful become legends. Today we're counting down 10 of the most notorious criminals to ever walk the earth. From Wild West outlaws to billion-dollar fraudsters, these are the names that changed history. Let's get into it. 1. Billy the Kid. We start in the 1800s with a kid, literally. Born Henry McCarthy in 1859 in New York City, he'd become the most legendary outlaw the American West ever produced. After losing his mother at 14, Billy drifted through the Southwest and eventually landed in New Mexico, where he slipped into a life of crime. But here's the thing about Billy. People liked him. He was charming, funny, quick with a joke, and just as quick with a gun. His big moment came during the Lincoln County War of 1878, a brutal feud between rival factions fighting over money and power in New Mexico. Billy rode with a group called the Regulators, and the violence that followed made him a legend. Historians credit him with somewhere between 8 and 12 kills, though folklore has inflated that number considerably. He was captured, sentenced to hang, and then escaped. Killed 2 deputies on the way out. Didn't matter. Sheriff Pat Garrett tracked him down and ended it on July 14, 1881. Billy was just 21 years old, dead at 21, and still famous 150 years later. Not a bad legacy for a kid from New York. 2. Charles Ponzi. From gunfights to white-collar crime, meet the man whose name literally became a synonym for fraud. Charles Ponzi was born in Italy in 1882 and came to America chasing the dream. What he found instead was a scheme so audacious it still gets taught in business schools today, as a warning. His con was simple on paper. He claimed he could exploit price differences in international postal coupons to generate massive returns. 50% in 45 days, double your money in 90. Thousands of people lined up to hand him cash. At his peak in 1920, he was pulling in millions per week. The catch? He wasn't investing anything. He was just using new investors' money to pay old ones. The classic Ponzi scheme which, well, now you know where that name comes from. When it collapsed, roughly 40,000 people had been defrauded. He went to prison, was deported to Italy, and eventually died broke in Brazil in 1949. The man who promised everyone a fortune ended up with nothing. 3. Lucky Luciano. If Ponzi was the con artist, Lucky Luciano was the architect, the man who turned organized crime in America into a corporation. Born Salvatore Lucania in Sicily in 1897, he came to New York's Lower East Side as a child and found his calling in the streets. He survived a brutal gang attack that left him scarred, hence Lucky, and rose through the ranks alongside future legends like Meyer Lansky and Bugsy Siegel. But what made Luciano different wasn't just his ruthlessness, it was his vision. In 1931, he reorganized the American Mafia into a national syndicate with a governing commission to settle disputes and coordinate operations. Think of it as the mob getting its first board of directors. He was convicted in 1936 on prostitution charges and sentenced to 30 to 50 years. But here's the wild part. During World War II, the U.S. government actually used his connections to help secure New York's ports. In exchange, his sentence was commuted, and he was deported to Italy, where he continued pulling strings until his death in 1962. Lucky Luciano didn't just run a crime family, he built a criminal nation. 4. Al Capone. You knew he was coming. Al Capone, born in Brooklyn in 1899, is maybe the most iconic gangster America has ever produced. He dropped out of school at 14, joined street gangs, got the nickname Scarface from a bar fight, and eventually landed in Chicago, where he turned prohibition into a gold mine. Bootlegging, gambling, prostitution, extortion. The Chicago outfit under Capone was a full-scale criminal empire generating millions annually. He was also terrifyingly violent. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929, where 7 rival gang members were executed in a garage, has his fingerprints all over it. And yet, Capone also ran soup kitchens, donated to charities, played the role of a community benefactor while ordering hits from the same desk. His downfall wasn't a shootout, it was taxes. The feds couldn't pin the murders on him, so they got him for tax evasion in 1931. 11 years in prison, including time at Alcatraz. He was released in 1939 with his mind already deteriorating from syphilis and died in Florida in 1947. Al Capone is a big reason the FBI exists. Let that sink in. 5. Meyer Lansky. While Capone was making headlines, Meyer Lansky was quietly making money, and that made him far more dangerous. Born in 1902 in what is now Belarus, Lansky immigrated to New York and grew up alongside Lucky Luciano and Bugsy Siegel on the Lower East Side. But unlike his flashy associates, Lansky stayed in the shadows, focused on the numbers, the logistics, the money. He helped build the National Crime Syndicate and became the financial brain behind the mob's operations. Illegal gambling, money laundering, bootlegging, and eventually a casino empire that stretched into Cuba. He earned the nickname the mob's accountant for good reason. What's remarkable is that despite being a central figure in American organized crime for decades, Lansky was never convicted of any major charges. He died of lung cancer in Miami in 1983 at age 80, a free man. The most dangerous criminal is sometimes the one you never hear about. 6. John Dillinger. Back to the action. John Dillinger, born in Indianapolis in 1903, was the Great Depression's most wanted man, and somehow the public loved him for it. After a rough upbringing and a stint in the Navy that ended in desertion, Dillinger went to prison for robbery. Prison didn't rehabilitate him, it educated him. He came out in 1933 with a gang, a plan, and absolutely no fear of law enforcement. His crew tore through Midwestern banks with military precision, high-speed getaways, stolen weapons, and a level of audacity that made the FBI look incompetent. He was linked to at least 10 deaths and escaped from custody multiple times, including once using a carved wooden gun. With banks being public enemy number one during the Depression, Dillinger was almost seen as a folk hero, a man sticking it to the institutions that had broken the country. It ended on July 22, 1934. The FBI tracked him to a Chicago movie theater. He was betrayed by an informant, and he was shot dead outside as he left the building. A wooden gun got him out of jail. He couldn't escape the FBI. 7. Bonnie and Clyde. No list like this is complete without them. Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow are one of the most romanticized and misunderstood criminal partnerships in American history. Bonnie, born in 1910 in Texas, was a bright kid with big dreams. Clyde, born in 1909, grew up dirt poor and turned to crime early. They met in 1930 and something clicked, a partnership that would terrorize the central United States for the next 4 years. Their gang robbed gas stations, rural businesses, and the occasional bank, leaving a trail of violence behind them. At least 13 people killed, 9 of them law enforcement officers. They weren't just robbers. They were willing to shoot their way out of almost anything. But the public was captivated. Depression-era America saw them as rebels, outlaws fighting a rigged system. Newspapers printed their photos like movie stars. It ended on May 23, 1934, an ambush near Gibbsland, Louisiana. Law enforcement pumped over 100 bullets into their car. Neither had a chance. Bonnie and Clyde were outlaws, but they became legends. 8. Whitey Bulger. From Depression-era outlaws to one of Boston's darkest chapters, James Whitey Bulger was born in 1929 in South Boston and became the city's most feared crime boss, and one of the FBI's most embarrassing secrets. Bulger ran the Winter Hill Gang, controlling extortion, drug trafficking, loan sharking, and murder across South Boston. He is believed to be connected to at least 19 deaths. But what made him truly dangerous was his other job, FBI informant. Bulger fed the FBI information on rival gangs while the Bureau looked the other way on his crimes. It was corruption at the highest level, and it went on for years. When indictments finally came in the mid-1990s, someone inside tipped him off. He vanished. For 16 years, he was on the FBI's most wanted list, living under fake identities, until his arrest in Santa Monica, California in 2011. Convicted in 2013 on 31 counts including multiple murders, he was sentenced to life. In 2018, he was beaten to death by fellow inmates in a West Virginia prison. The FBI's most useful informant became their biggest scandal. 9. Pablo Escobar. Power, violence, billions of dollars. Pablo Escobar is in a category of his own. Born in Colombia in 1949, Escobar grew up poor but ambitious. By the 1970s, he had moved into cocaine, and by the 1980s, his Medellin cartel controlled an estimated 80% of the world's cocaine supply. The money was almost incomprehensible, billions per year. But with that power came unimaginable violence. Politicians, judges, journalists, police officers, Anyone who got in the way was either bribed or eliminated. His cartel is linked to the deaths of at least 4,000 people, and yet he also built houses for the poor, funded soccer fields. Communities that benefited from his money defended him fiercely. Escobar understood that power isn't just about fear, it's about loyalty. He surrendered in 1991, was imprisoned in a facility he essentially designed himself, then escaped in 1992. A massive manhunt followed. It ended on December 2, 1993. Escobar was shot dead by Colombian security forces, one day after his 44th birthday. His death didn't end the drug trade, it just changed it. 10. El Chapo. If Escobar wrote the playbook, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman updated it for the modern era. Born in 1957 in rural Sinaloa, Mexico, Guzman grew up in poverty and entered the drug trade as a teenager. He rose to lead the Sinaloa cartel, a global trafficking machine moving cocaine, heroin, meth, and marijuana into the United States and beyond, using everything from tunnels to submarines. And then there were the escapes. He broke out of a maximum security Mexican prison in 2001 and wasn't caught again for 13 years. Recaptured in 2014, he escaped again in 2015 through a mile-long tunnel dug directly beneath his cell. You cannot make this up. He was finally extradited to the United States in 2017, convicted in 2019, and sentenced to life plus 30 years. He's currently in a U.S. Supermax prison, the same kind built to hold people you can never, ever let escape again. El Chapo turned drug trafficking into a logistical empire. The cartel he built is still operating today. From a teenage gunslinger in New Mexico to a drug lord who built tunnels beneath maximum security prisons, these 10 people left marks on history that can't be erased. Some were products of poverty, some of greed, some of pure ambition, but all of them remind us how far outside the lines a human being can operate and what the cost of that ultimately looks like. If you found this video interesting, drop a like. It genuinely helps the channel. Comment below, who on this list surprised you the most? And if you're new here, subscribe. Thanks for watching and see you on the next one.